We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week. This is part 4 of building your Sonex tail kit. By now you should be quite familiar with the tools and techniques necessary to build this popular tail kit. Now that deburring is complete, we want to start riveting using the proper size rivets as per the plans. And one area where we can't use our automatic or pneumatic riveting gun is in this narrow spot here, but a hand riveter will work just fine. And always keep the area clecoed. I have 2 clecos on the reverse side, and then we can rivet in here with the hand. Now here's an example where we have a little problem riveting. Right here we need to pull a rivet, and the stem is very close to the extrusion here, and that means that when we go to put our rivet gun in place, we're going to have to be pulling this at a bit of an angle. If we pull it at an angle, we won't be able to get the rivet to set nice and flat the way it should. It shouldn't be set pulled way up like this or in any other direction. Now we have a tool that will help us in these situations, and it's this piece here. This has a hole in the end for the rivet stem and basically an angled wedge here. And what we do is place this over the rivet stem, and that allows the rivet gun to sit at an angle and get into tight places and yet still keep the rivet head flat against the surface. So now I can pull the rivet properly. If that makes any sense. And here we have the skeleton riveted. And note that on the tip ribs, the back of the rib to the back spar we left unriveted because that will get another piece a little bit later. Prior to installing the skin, we want to draw center lines on the flanges of each of our forward ribs, right down the center. And here's our horizontal skin. There are 2 of these, and they're both the same, interchangeable. One for the left, one for the right, but they're both the same. And hard to see, but they're full of holes, pre-drilled, which means they're going to match up nicely with our skeleton. And we'll carry this over to our table. Now I have the skeleton sitting on the table up. The way we know the bottom, of course, is the flange on our spar is down on the table. And I have the front spar even with the front edge of the table. That'll aid us in installing the skin. And we can take our skin and simply match up the shape with the skeleton, and we're going to let one edge dangle over the side of the table. And we simply walk it up, match up the edge with the spar. We will see that the holes line up very nicely, and we'll simply go ahead and fill it full of clecos. Now these holes are the number 40 pilot holes, so we'll use our silver clecos to install this. And if we need to get the holes lined up for the ribs, we can simply reach underneath and move them around until we get the holes lined up by simply shifting the ribs a little bit. Now we have to adjust our rib underneath here, looking for the line we drew on the center of the flange. And when we see that center, we'll go ahead and use the pre-drilled holes in the skin to go into the center of the flange and then cleco as we go. And similarly, at the other end, we have our other rib. And likewise, we need to use these pilot holes to fill in these holes which aren't in the rib at this time, holding the rib nice and even with the top edge of the skin. And we're going to do all this with the number 40 drill and cleco as we go. We have finished with one side, so I turn the skeleton around and we have the edge of the table over here, so we can go ahead and add the other skin to the other side and just duplicate our effort in the exact same way. And we'll go ahead and cleco like before. On the end ribs, we want to fold the very tip 90 degrees inward to make a shape like this. And this should match your plans. Want to do this on both sides. We can now drill the end ribs just like we did before along the edge with our pilot hole size drill, and our front nose rib also with our pilot number 40 drill bit. And then of course we're going to repeat for the other side. Here's a better view of my support here and back here to keep the clecos on the other side off of the table. When we have completed clecoing both sides and finished drilling out our nose ribs and our end ribs on both sides, we can then begin to drill out all of the holes to their final rivet size. In this case, a size number 30 or 1/8 inch drill. and we will use our copper colored clecos to re-cleco as we drill out. When we're done with both sides, we will flip this over and do the same to the top side. The one area that we do not want to drill out is on the top side. We're looking at the bottom now, but when we flip it over, on the top side, the trailing edge spar, we do not want to drill out. We're going to leave them to their pilot hole size because we will be adding a hinge to that area. And now we have all of the holes drilled out to our size number 30. I have the top facing up, and notice my rear main spar is still set at the original pilot size hole. That'll make it a little easier when we put the hinge in. Our job now is to uncleco everything and deburr, take it all apart, deburr the skin and the skeleton, and then reassemble. Also notice that at the very tips, we're going to leave those as pilot holes because we have our fiberglass tips eventually going down there. At each tip rib, notice that we have left the holes at their original size for pilot holes. This is because we're not going to rivet this right away. We'll have our fiberglass tip also share these holes, so we won't drill these out for now. The flat file is perfect for getting these flanges down here. We are now all deburred and ready to reassemble. One technique, if you're working by yourself for getting the skins back on the skeleton, is to lay them out side by side like I have here, with the edge hanging out over the table. Then we'll put our skeleton in place. And then if we cleco the edge down here, just the edge going all the way across, it makes it easier to then fold this over and cleco it. And after you've clecoed both sides, you can then flip it over and not have to rebend the top down because it will already be attached at this edge. We're going to go ahead and reassemble in preparation for riveting. Now we are ready for riveting. I have the top up here, and remember the main spar on the top only. We are not going to rivet at all because we have a hinge coming a little bit later, but I can go ahead and rivet the rest. I like to rivet starting at the main spar here first and then work my way towards the trailing edge. And I'll do one section and then the other, and then we can turn it over and get the other side. Remember, the very ends at the tips are not going to be riveted because that's where our fiberglass tips will go when we're all finished. we're going to begin the construction of our elevator. Now, we're going to use 2 pieces of this rudder/elevator skin. In other words, the same component or same skin we used for our rudder will also be used for our elevator. Other than also we're going to use 2 of these. This makes up 1/2 of our elevator, so we'll end up making or preparing 2 of them. Notice the shape, and comes apart like that. And they're 48 inches long. Our first step is we need to cut the edges to a particular dimension in our plans, and we'll show you how we're going to cut ours. There's going to be one left and one right. We'll prepare one of them now, and then we can make the second one. Of course, they come with a plastic white film on them that helps protect them from getting scratched up. We'll pull that off as we begin our assembly. Let's take a look at the end down here where we're going to make our initial trimming. Here I have prepared the right elevator skin by drawing some cut lines as per our plans. Now the plans will give the dimension from the corner to this point here, and this line will go up to the very corner up at the top. Now when we rotate it, note that we go from the corner in, and our plans show us the dimension used from this edge, and then as we rotate, notice that it comes back to a point here which matches up with the initial location when we started. So this is quite easy to draw, and I'm going to then use my snips to cut this out. I'm going to start from the corner and work my way down. Now when I cut, I'm going to cut outside of the line so that if I ruin the metal or have a sharp edge, I can go back then with my second cut right up to the line and make it look real nice. The other left-hand skin is similar to this, but just a reflection in the way the line is set up. Here is the one for the left side, and if you'll notice again, that same dimension with the line going up to the corner. Whoops, I'm sorry, from the corner here. And over. So in effect, the easiest way to understand this is that if we put them next to each other, a little hard to see this one, we have our line going from here to the corner and then back down. We'll make one at a time. After making these cuts, we need to then cut off with a straight cut the right amount of distance to get the length of the skin just right. But we'll do that last after we make sure we get this cut correct. Now that's our rough cut. We'll go back and trim this up real nice with a second cut and then a file to take care of all of the areas that need to be cleaned up. Our last and final cut is the distance from one end to the amount from your plans, and then a nice straight line, 90-degree line, top and bottom, and we'll cut it off with our snips there. We'll clean up that edge and then produce the left skin, which is a mirror duplicate of this one. I cut this area here first, and then I'm going to put a slice here to take off this corner, and that'll make it much easier to work on the rest. That'll make it much easier to cut this now. And here is our completed right and left elevators. We can remove the white plastic. Now I have the right elevator, and we're going to install the center rib. Now the first step was to measure from the straight edge down by the amount specified in the plans and draw a line, and that line will be all the way around on all sides. And then using the plans, we want to mark rivet locations. Now it's a little hard to see here. I left the white plastic on for now. I will take it off in a moment. But basically these were 1 inch apart. And so I'm going to drill with my number 40 drill bit at each of my rivet locations all the way around. The only one I'm not going to drill is the one on this edge here, because the hinge is going to go here eventually, so we'll leave that off, that one rivet here undrilled. But I'm going to go ahead and drill all the other marks. That's all laid out in your plans as to where those marks are located and how many. Then we're going to take our rib T0702, and I'm going to draw a line. I've already drawn a line down the center. It can be in any color, but it has to be a line that we can see. And then we'll insert this rib inside, and we will look for the line we drew underneath each of the little pilot holes. That way we can get it located exactly correct and have the center of this flange on all sides right underneath each of our holes. I've inserted the rib inside of the elevator skin. I've clamped the flange on the shorts area because I want to get at least one cleco in the end to make sure the rib is held as tightly as possible to this edge before drilling the rest of the holes. So I'll go ahead and drill through the pilot hole. I found my line. I'm going to add one cleco, and then I'm going to position and continue drilling when I see the line on all three sides. And if you have trouble, once you close this up, take the clamp off with the cleco and close it up, and if you need to move that rib and you're having a little difficulty, remember you can always come into the edge and push with a long object like a hinge pin in order to center the rib and find the line prior to drilling and clecoing. Now here we see that I have finished drilling and clecoing the rib on all three sides. Now we're going to move down to the end of the elevator. This will be the straight edge, the end with the straight cut. Notice I have drawn a line. This line is 1/4 inch from the edge, and it goes all the way around on all three sides. Also notice I have marked rivet locations. This rivet pattern and its spacing is identical to the rib we just installed. So after marking, I'm going to go ahead now and drill with my number 40 drill bit each of these locations. The only one I'm going to skip will be the one that goes right here on this lip. I'll drill the rest of them. Then we'll go get another rib similar to the one we just installed and put it so that it is flush with the edge, and then use our drilled holes to drill into the flange and cleco.
Please, we'll be right back.
Now we need to repeat for the left elevator skin exactly the same procedure of installing a center rib and the end rib. Now we're going to assemble the radiator horn and ribs. Now this is a piece of steel. It is pre-drilled, and attached to each of these ears will be the elevator horn. This is at the root rib, and it matches nicely. There's going to be one on each side, and we're basically just going to drill through all of the holes and into the rib. Now there is a left and a right. This is T0704, and this one is the left. And then the right rib is just the mirror complement of it. We set this on the table, and it is important that we have these set up so that there's no twist, and we can ensure that by having a flat table. I'm simply putting them both flat on a table, and we want the bottom edge and the forward edge to be even with the rib itself. So for each rib, we'll keep it even on the bottom, and our table will ensure that, and then we want it even up at the front here. So I'm going to attach one at a time, cleco a couple holes to ensure that it's nice and straight, and then when I attach the second one, I need to make sure this is on the table, because it is important to keep our left elevator and our right elevator wing even, and that's the purpose of having these flat on the table, so that we're not twisted one way or the other. So I will drill with my pilot size holes and cleco, do one side and then the other, and then we'll up drill and rivet. Some of the holes are hard to get at because of the obstruction with your drill, and that's where the long drill bit comes in very handy for getting those holes. It's because of the flexibility of the drill bit that you can get around in some tight places. When we're all done drilling, we can then open the holes up to the final rivet size of a number 30 drill bit or 1/8, and then we'll take it apart and deburr and then reassemble and rivet. We have disassembled and deburred and are now ready for riveting. We'll do all the easy ones first, and then we have a few that are going to be a little hard to get at because of the obstruction, and we'll take a look at those. The two rivets I could not get easily were these last two right here, and the reason is that the gun can't get seated properly without bending the stem over or getting a crooked rivet in there. So, we're going to use our tool, the wedge, place that over the rivet, and that wedge there allows our rivet gun to get in at a better angle. Perfectly set, and then do the same thing with the one next door. Now, we want to take the left and the right elevator skin and slide them over the corresponding horn. Now, this is sitting upside down, that's so that this will sit flat on the table. And we want to align the front so that they're even. And what we're going to do now is take a measurement from one end to the other and confirm that our length is proper. Now, we want to take a measurement from the edge on this side all the way over to the edge on the other side. Right here. We want to make sure we get the 78 inches specified in our plans. Now, this is important because the width of the elevator has a lot to do with how well it's going to fit to the stabilizer when we match them up with the hinge. Now, if we come up a little short of 78 inches, of course we can slide this out a little bit. And the same with on the other side. If we have more than 78 inches, we can of course push the horn or push the rib in. But if we still have greater than 78 inches, we would need to trim the skin slightly all the way around to make sure we can get exactly 78 inches. On the root end of each of our elevator skins, we want to draw a line 1/4 inch in from the edge all the way around, and then mark the rivet locations as specified in our plans. We can go ahead then and use our number 40 drill bit and drill the pilot holes. And we're going to do that for both elevator skins. Now we have to prepare our hinge TO708 for the elevator. We're going to start by taking the full-length hinge and pulling out the pin. And then we can separate the two pieces. And we want to cut one of the pieces to the size specified in our plans. After cutting to the proper length, and this can be cut quite easily with your snips, we want to mark the rivet locations. Now this is rather straightforward. I've drawn a center line halfway from the top to the bottom, and then in the center of each loop I've placed a mark, and that's where we're going to drill a number 40 size pilot hole for the entire length. And these are exactly 1 inch apart and centered on the loop. Now we're preparing to install the hinge on our elevator. Our elevator is upside down and it is on top of 2 supports here. I have a square steel beam. You can use a piece of lumber. The important thing is that it needs to be straight, because we're going to be installing the hinge along this edge, and we want to make sure that it is nice and straight because we're going to have it attached to the stabilizer with a hinge pin, and so we want a nice straight reference line. I have one also in the back to hold it up. This is going to be the outside edge of one of the elevators. It's the straight end with the straight cut, and I have a mark 1.5 inches from the end, and that's going to be where the hinge begins. Now if we place our hinge with the loops down, which is really the top side of the elevator, up to that mark, and we go take a look at the other end, we will see that it should line up with the center edge. And we note that it in fact does match with the very corner down here. So that's where we want the hinge to be located lengthwise. And before drilling the hinge, we can place the hinge in place and verify that the mark for the hole that will go into our center rib is aligned properly. We can adjust the mark if necessary to make sure all of those rivets stay in line for the internal flange of the center rib. Now we're back at the outer side, and we have the hinge basically in place of where it is going to be located. This cleco here. If we look at our plans, the bottom of these hoops are supposed to be about 1.5 millimeters up from the surface. So we need to raise this up 1.5 millimeters. Now that's not very much. So I will find an object that is approximately 1.5 millimeters thick. In my case here, it's this steel square that I have. And so the idea is if I place this underneath, that will hold it approximately at the right distance off of the surface. So I'm going to go through and see if I can get the hinge set up for the entire length, and when I'm ready I can drill a hole through my pilot hole and cleco as I go, keeping this distance for the entire length of the hinge. Now we need to repeat this installation of the hinge for the other elevator skin. At this stage we can now drill out all of the holes to their final rivet size, which would be our number 30 drill bit, or 1/8 inch, and of course replace all of our silver clecos with the copper colored ones. The only holes we don't want to touch are the ones on the inside of each of the elevator skins. We'll save these holes later when we drill the horn that fits inside. So we won't touch any holes around this edge. Once everything's drilled out to its final rivet size, we will then disassemble, deburr everything, reassemble, and rivet. At that stage, we'll line up the two elevator skins and align it with our horn and ribs in the center.